So in part one of this series, I built, flew, and unfortunately crashed a 6-meter RC plane that I made out of 1-inch foam board. In this video, I will be rebuilding and repairing that plane to hopefully fly it again and land it without breaking it this time. So to start out, I inspected the damage, and it was pretty broken, but still repairable, as foam board is very repairable with a bottle of Gorilla Glue. You can basically join it together as good as new. So what was broken was the connection of the wing to the nacelle had broken because that was a weak point on this design. Also, the nacelle had broken off and the motor had cut into the biplane segment because the nacelle broke off, and that allowed the motor or the prop to hit the foam board on the biplane segment, and it ripped out a big piece of that. Also, some of the electronic connections had broken in the crash because the foam board parts broke and the wires that were connected onto there, and the wires got ripped because they were trying to hold the whole thing together. But all this should be pretty easy to fix. Also, I'll be upgrading it quite a bit by removing most of the fishing line and replacing that with some foam board struts that would be reinforced and made into trusses with some wooden vertical sticks, to give them even more strength. So to start off, I glued the parts back together basically how they were before I did any modifications to them. I used ratchet straps to hold the main wing part together and hold the nacelles together while I glued those. Then I cut out some foam board pieces that would go in place of the outer wing where it would connect to the nacelle, because that's not how it would connect this time, because I would be replacing that method of connection. And so I built another foam piece that would be glued onto there, and that would reinforce the nacelle and hopefully make it a bit stronger. Then for the struts, I carved some foam board using a sharp razor blade and multi-tool with a pretty heavy grit sandpaper, around like 60 to 100 grit. Works pretty well, I found. I then glued those onto the main wing and used thin pieces of wood about a 1/4 inch thick to reinforce that whole structure and make it a bit stronger. I covered the foam board strut with some packing tape on one of them, some red packing tape, and the regular silver film that I've been using for the rest of the plane. I used that on the other one to give it a cool asymmetrical look. I decided I'd build some new wing tips to give it a little bit more wingspan and hopefully decrease the wing loading a little bit and increase the efficiency by angling those wing tips up. I don't know if this would actually help much, as they're not really angled up that much, but it would at least get the plane to 7 meters so that I could say I flew a 7-meter plane rather than a 6-meter one. So I used some barbecue skewers and Gorilla Glue and a bit of packing tape to kind of glue those wingtips onto the edge of the other wings. This would increase each of the outer wings to 2.5 meters rather than 2 meters, which would increase the overall wingspan of the plane to 7 meters rather than 6 meters. I then started repairing the skis because they had broken in the crash. I used some foam spray to resecure the pillar that would connect to the bottom ski, and that worked pretty well to stiffen it up there and keep it from breaking. I then used some screws and wood glue to glue the other ski onto those pillars, because the other screws had stripped out because in the crash they broke off. I then started on fixing the electronics, the wiring, because some of the wiring had ripped out during the crash because the foam board that was holding the electronics broke, and then the wires were basically holding the plane together. So some of the connectors got ripped out and stuff. So I resoldered the wires onto the ESCs and resoldered the DuPont connectors and replaced those, and did a better job of making sure they would be easily able to unplug if the plane had a bad crash again. Then it was time to recover all the parts with the silver film to make it look good. So I did that, and then it was basically time to fly, except for a few last minute modifications that I made. The first one was making some wider skis, and that would hopefully allow it to glide over the snow rather than just sinking into the snow, so I wouldn't have to clear out the snow over the ice, the frozen pond, and it would just be able to glide over the snow rather than having to be on ice without snow on it, if that makes sense. The next modification I made was adding some weight in the nose to hopefully get the CG in front of the center of pressure. Pretty sure that's the way it goes. And that would make the plane stable rather than unstable like it was on the last flight where it crashed. So I brought it out to the pond and tried to take it off on the snow with the wider skis that I made. That didn't work. So I went back home, left the plane at the pond, made some extensions for those skis to hopefully prevent them from digging into the snow. And I glued those on, but it still didn't work. It was too much weight on the plane for those skis to keep it from sinking into the snow and allow it to take off. So I had to clear a runway, and that took a while, but I got that runway cleared, and then I took off the plane. It took off really well. It flew great, but there was snow on the ground, and I'm not a very good pilot. So if it had been on ice when it landed, it would have just slid on that ice. But since there was snow on the ground, I came in a little steep, and it kind of dug into the snow and stopped real fast, and the wings broke off and flung forward, kind of, because it's just not a very strong plane for how big it is, how much force is on that XPS foam. It's just a lot of force that it can't withstand. So here's that flight now. As you can see, the plane took off very quickly and almost went up too fast and rolled over, but I got it back stable, and I tried to land it, but came in too steep and crashed into the ground. So after 4 flights and 4 crashes, I'm a bit tired of rebuilding and repairing this plane over and over again, and I want to move on to some other projects that I've been working on for a while. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.